Hello, friends. Today you'll hear a confession that unravels a marriage before it begins. This is Mara, a woman facing the camera with a promise she made to Jonas. She vowed forever, but doubts now threaten to bury them both. Behind her words lies the terror of unspoken truths. Watch closely. The camera's red light blinks like a heartbeat, unblinking, pinning Mara in its gaze. She sits in the dim interview room, a single lamp casting shadows across her face. Soft jawline taut, eyes darting to the lens before dropping to her hands. The air hums with the low whir of the machine, a mechanical witness to words she's buried deep. "Start whenever you're ready," the interviewer says off camera, voice neutral, a prompt like a door creaking open. Mara swallows, fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. The promise. It's been months since she spoke it. To Jonas, in the quiet of their apartment, rain pattering against the window like secrets escaping. "Forever," she'd said, sealing it with a kiss, the ring box heavy in his palm. But now, articulating it feels like pulling thorns from her throat. Tension coils in her chest, a vice tightening with each breath. What if the truth slips out? What if saying it aloud shatters the fragile trust they've built on silence? "I promised Jonas," she begins, her voice a thread, naming him for the first time here, the syllables foreign on her tongue. The camera captures it all, the flicker in her eyes, the pause that stretches like doubt itself. "We were talking about the future, moving forward together. I said I'd be there no matter what. That our life, our commitment, would hold." Her words falter, uncertain, illuminating the chasm between what she vowed and the whispers inside her. The doubts that creep in at night, the fear that loyalty means swallowing her fears whole. The light warms her skin, but she feels exposed. Raw. The camera doesn't judge. It just records, forcing her to hear the hesitation in her own voice. It's not just words. It's everything we built. A beat. Her breath steadies, the tension easing into something sharper, recognition. But lately, I've wondered if promising forever means ignoring the parts of me that question it. If I can really give that without losing myself. She leans forward slightly, eyes locking on the lens now, as if confronting her reflection. The promise hangs there, half-formed, teetering toward confession. Is she ready to voice the full fracture? The red light pulses on. Later that evening, the fork scraped against the plate, a faint echo in the dim kitchen light. Mara sat across from Jonas, their dinner a ritual of steam rising from reheated pasta, untouched by words. The apartment hummed with a low drone of city traffic outside. But here, in this pocket of quiet, everything felt suspended, frozen like breath held too long. She watched him chew methodically, his eyes on his food, and wondered if this was peace or just the weight of what they'd promised each other. Her hand rested on the table, fingers brushing the simple band on her left ring finger. The ring, cool metal, a circle unbroken, had once felt like certainty, slipped on during that rainy evening 2 years ago. Now, it pressed against her skin, a reminder that dug deeper with every silent bite. She twisted it absently, the motion pulling her gaze downward. The promise it symbolized wasn't just words. It was this, the unspoken agreement to let the days slide by without probing the cracks. Jonas set his fork down, the clink shattering the calm like thin ice. He didn't look up, just reached for his water glass, sipping slowly. Mara's pulse quickened, a subtle thaw in her chest. What if she spoke now? The thought coiled tight, fear blooming as the silence stretched. It wasn't protection anymore. This quiet had become the promise itself, a vow to swallow doubts whole. But tonight, it squeezed, turning the air thick, her breaths shallow against the rise of something insistent. She glanced at him again, his profile sharp in the lamplight, and felt the instability settle between them like fog. The ring warmed under her thumb, no longer a shield, but a tether, pulling her toward the edge. When did this hush start binding her tighter than any oath? The question hung, unanswered, as the tension hummed alive in her veins. A few days passed, and rain dotted the rooftop ledge, a fine mist that blurred the city lights below into hazy halos. Mara leaned against the rusted railing, her coat collar turned up against the chill, arms wrapped tight around herself. The air smelled of wet concrete and distant exhaust, the kind of evening that pressed secrets closer. Lena stood a few feet away, hands in her pockets, watching Mara with that steady gaze, part friend, part interrogator. "You've been carrying this since that interview," Lena said, her voice cutting through the patter of rain. "Naming him out loud, Jonas, like it was a confession you didn't want to make. And then the dinners, silent as graves. It's not loyalty anymore, Mara. It's a cage." Mara's breath hitched, a knot of anxiety twisting in her chest. She stared at the puddle forming at her feet, reflecting fractured neon. "I promised him everything. If I speak now, what if it shatters? Silence keeps it whole." Lena stepped closer, rain slicking her hair. "Whole? Or just frozen? You think fidelity means swallowing your doubts, letting them fester until the whole thing rots from inside? I've seen you up here before, alone, rehearsing words you'll never say. That promise, it's not a chain. It's a choice. But choosing silence out of fear, that's not honoring him. That's honoring your terror." The words landed like the rain, steady and insistent. Mara's pulse quickened, the anxiety shifting, not dissolving, but sharpening into something urgent, a readiness bubbling under her skin. She met Lena's eyes, the rooftop's isolation amplifying the moment, the downpour isolating them in a world of their own doubts. What if honesty breaks us? What if saying it aloud makes the cracks impossible to ignore? Lena didn't flinch. "Then it's already breaking. Without words, your promise is just echoes. You can't stay faithful by staying quiet, Mara. Not to him, not to yourself." The rain intensified, drumming on the rooftop like unanswered questions. Mara felt the shift inside, a tension coiling toward release, words pressing against her lips, unbidden. But she held them, for now, the void between hope and fear stretching wide beneath the storm. The next afternoon, the door buzzed open in the dim apartment hallway, a sliver of fluorescent light cutting through the late afternoon haze. Mara froze mid-step, her hand hovering over the coffee mug on the counter. Elliot Haynes stood there, uninvited, his coat dusted with the city's faint drizzle, a half smile playing on his lips like he owned the threshold. "Surprise," he said, voice low, casual. "Jonas let me up. Said you might need a distraction." She nodded, mechanical, the mug's warmth seeping into her palm. Distraction. From what? The ring box sat unopened on the shelf, its velvet edge catching the muted light filtering through half-drawn blinds. She gestured him in, the space suddenly smaller, air thicker. Elliot shrugged off his coat, eyes scanning the room, the sparse furniture, the tripod in the corner where the interview camera still loomed from yesterday's session, its lens a black eye staring blankly. He didn't comment, just dropped into the armchair like he'd rehearsed it. "Rough week? You look like you're carrying the whole skyline on your shoulders." Mara sank onto the couch opposite, legs tucked under. "Just thinking." The word hung, inadequate. Inside, Her mind stuttered. What does a promise mean when it feels like a chain? As if the camera were rolling again, forcing her to answer. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, gaze steady. Thinking about what? The usual, work, the grind, or something heavier, like ditching the script altogether? A pause, his fingers drumming softly on the armrest. I mean, life's short. Why tie yourself to one path? I've bounced around, no leases on the heart, no vows that stick like glue. Freedom's not chaos, it's breathing room. The words landed soft, insidious, slipping past her guard. She stared at the camera, its unblinking presence a reminder of yesterday's confessions. The way she'd named Jonas aloud, the promise crystallizing under scrutiny. Now, Elliot's voice painted alternatives. Cities unwalked, nights unclaimed. A self untethered. Her pulse quickened, not with thrill, but a slow unraveling. If I walk away, do I lose him or find me? The thought bloomed, sharp, unbidden, flooding in like rain through a cracked window. Fear gripped tighter, not of breaking words, but of the silence that had become her cage. Jonas's texts from earlier echoed unspoken. Dinner tonight, the ring implied. But here, with Elliot watching, the quiet between them all sharpened, freedom as threat, as lure. He tilted his head, observing her drift. See? It's tempting, isn't it? No weight, just you. She swallowed, the influx of what-ifs churning. Promises as prisons or shields. The camera's shadow stretched across the floor, indifferent. Could she hold the vow without fracturing inside, when unbound sounded so alive? The question lingered, unanswered, as the city hummed beyond the glass. A week later, for another session, the camera's unblinking eye hovers inches from Mara's face, its lens a cold mirror reflecting the faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. She sits in the dim-lit room, the chair creaking under her slight shift, walls bare except for the shadows pooling in corners. The interviewer off-screen, voice steady like a pulse. Tell me about the promise. Mara hesitates, fingers twisting in her lap, the ring box tucked away in her pocket like a secret weight. She starts slow, words measured, as if testing the air. It's to Jonas. We promised each other everything. The future, the unknowns. I said yes because it felt right in that moment. Her voice is even, rehearsed almost, a careful script of loyalty. But the camera catches it, the flicker in her eyes, the way her breath catches. Can fear be voiced without betrayal? The question lingers, unanswered, as her eyes meet the lens. Pleading, perhaps, for absolution it can't give. The room feels smaller, the weight of unspoken truths pressing in, accelerating towards something inevitable. That same stormy night, rain lashed the rooftop like 1,000 unspoken words, each drop stinging Mara's skin as she stood there, soaked to the bone. The city below blurred into a gray haze, indifferent to her unraveling. She gripped the rusted railing, knuckles white, the weight of Jonas's ring box heavy in her coat pocket. A promise forged in the heat of certainty, now cold and insistent against her thigh. Doubt had been a whisper for weeks, but here, under the relentless downpour, it roared. Why can't I just say it? The question clawed inside her, mirroring the storm's fury. Silence had been her shield, wrapping the promise in layers of loyalty. But it was cracking now, letting in the chill of truth. She imagined his face at dinner last night, the quiet between them thickening like fog, hiding the fracture she alone felt widening. The rain traced rivulets down her face, mingling with tears she hadn't realized were falling. Her breath came in sharp bursts, tension coiling in her chest, a knot of fear that holding her tongue would preserve them, even as it poisoned the air. But what if silence was the real betrayal? The thought pierced her, warm at first, like sunlight breaking clouds, then laced with anxiety that made her pulse quicken. She could almost hear the interview cameras hum in her mind. Tell us, Mara. What does the promise mean now? No more hiding. The realization bloomed, resolute and raw, pushing her toward the edge, not of the roof, but of decision. She straightened, water streaming from her hair, and whispered to the storm, "I have to tell him." The words hung, fragile yet defiant. As thunder rolled distant approval, the promise wasn't a cage. It could bend if she dared speak. But could loyalty survive the break in her voice? She turned toward the door, steps deliberate through the pooling rain, the city's lights flickering like fragile hopes below. The following day, Mara sat across from Elliot in the dim corner of the coffee shop, her fingers tracing the edge of her untouched mug like a boundary line. She had steered the conversation here deliberately, away from Jonas, away from the ring box gathering dust in her drawer. "It's just a commitment we've made," she said, voice steady, controlled. "Nothing more complicated than that." She leaned back, walls up, guarding the promise like a fragile flame. Elliot nodded, his eyes drifting to the rain-streaked window outside. He was all easy angles, unburdened by the weight she carried. "Commitments are just stories we tell ourselves," he said casually, stirring his drink. "Until one day you realize the story's changed, and you're free to rewrite it. No one's keeping score but you." The words landed like a crack in glass, sudden, sharp. Mara's breath caught, her control fracturing, free to rewrite it. The phrase echoed, pulling at the threads she'd knotted so tightly around her doubts. What if the promise wasn't a chain, but a script she'd outgrown? Jealousy flickered then, hot and unfamiliar, not of Jonas, but of her own silenced self, the woman who'd vanish if she stayed mute. She excused herself abruptly, heart pounding, and texted Lena, "Need to talk, now." Lena's apartment was a sanctuary of soft lamps and scattered books, the kind of place where truths could spill without shattering. Mara paced the rug, words tumbling out before she could reel them back. "Elliot said something today about rewriting stories, and it made me see it, the promise to Jonas. It's supposed to be everything. But what if admitting I fear losing myself in it changes what it means? What if jealousy isn't about him, but about me fading away?" Lena watched her, unblinking, a mirror reflecting the raw edges Mara had hidden. "You've been holding it like a secret weapon," Lena said softly. No judgment, just the quiet push. "But secrets don't protect. They just make the silence louder. Tell me more. What scares you most?" Mara sank onto the couch, the wary grip loosening into something vulnerable, aching. The truth clawed free, not just doubt, but the terror of a love that demanded she bury her edges. As rain pattered against the pane, the question hung unspoken. Could she admit the promise had swelled beyond its shape, demanding a bolder dialogue to survive? Finally, that evening, the dim light of the apartment filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the wooden table. Mara sat rigid, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve, the air thick with the unsaid. Jonas faced her, his eyes steady but shadowed, the space between them humming with the weight of what they'd both carried alone. In the center, unopened, the red ring box waited like a sentinel. Small, velvet, its color a quiet accusation against the muted room. "I can't keep pretending," Mara said, her voice a thread, fraying at the edges. Anxiety coiled in her chest, sharp as the promise she'd made in the haze of certainty months ago. What if this shattered it all? The box gleamed, a reminder of the vows she'd guarded like a secret wound. Jonas leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze pulling her in. Then don't. Tell me the emptiness. I felt it too, the way our silences have grown walls. His words were plain, urgent, no poetry to soften the plea. He wanted her truths, raw and unfiltered, as if hearing them could mend the cracks she'd hidden. She swallowed, the fear rising like bile. It's like the promise swallowed me. I said yes to forever, but now it feels like a cage. I fear losing you if I admit I'm scared. Of us, of becoming someone I don't recognize. Her breath hitched, the confession spilling out, internal echoes of those solitary interviews flashing in her mind. What does fidelity mean when doubt whispers louder than love? Jonas nodded, his hand inching toward the box but stopping short. For me, it's the not knowing. I see you pulling away and it hollows me out. I promise to build with you. But if we're both pretending strength, what's left? Vulnerability softened his features, the warmth of shared exposure seeping through the chill of her dread. The box sat there, emblem of their original intent, now a bridge rather than a barrier. Mara reached for it first, her touch tentative, then firm. Maybe we redefine it. Not blind loyalty, but this, honesty as the vow. We stay, but we speak the fears. Promise me that. He covered her hand with his, the contact electric, resolving the knot in her gut into something warmer, resolute yet tender. Yes, that's the real forever. As the shadows deepened, the question lingered unspoken between them. Could fidelity endure, reshaped by truth rather than fear? The box remained closed, but lighter now, as if it held not just a ring, but possibility. In the hours that followed, the apartment hummed with the low drone of rain against the windows, shadows pooling in the corners like unspoken words. Mara sat across from Jonas at the scarred oak table, her fingers tracing the edge of a coaster, avoiding the red box that lay between them. Its velvet lid slightly askew, the promise inside glinting faintly under the dim lamp. Her chest tightened, that old fear clawing back. What if silence had been the glue all along? What if voicing the cracks shattered everything? Jonas leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes steady but shadowed. We've danced around it long enough, he said, voice low, not accusing, just raw. The promise, it's not just words, but it's weighing us down because we haven't said what scares us. Mara's breath caught. She glanced at the box, its crimson surface a quiet accusation, holding the ring they'd chosen in a rush of certainty months ago. Now it felt like a relic, beautiful but brittle. I promised you forever, she murmured, her voice threading anxiety like a frayed seam. But every time I think of it, I see myself fading into it, losing the parts of me that doubt, that wander. Keeping quiet felt safe, like it protected us. But it didn't. It just built walls. He nodded, slow, his hand inching toward hers but stopping short. I felt it too. The expectation that we'd never waver, that love meant no questions. I pushed because I was afraid you'd see my own hesitations, the job pulling me away, the nights I wondered if we were rushing the life we thought we wanted. His words hung, pulling the air taut, her pulse racing as the fear peaked. Was this the end? This naming of voids? Yet as he spoke, something shifted. The knot in her throat loosened, warmth seeping in like sunlight through clouds. She reached for the box, not opening it, but sliding it closer, their fingers brushing its edge together. What if we redefine it? She said, the words gaining strength. Not blind loyalty, but this. Us, honest about the fears. I commit to you, Jonas, but with room for my truths, and you to me, with yours. No more swallowing doubts to keep the peace. He squeezed her hand over the box, the red velvet warm now under their palms. Yeah, mutual. We build it together. Conditions we both own. If doubt creeps in, we say it. If it changes shape, we adapt. His gaze held hers, the tension uncoiling into a quiet resolve, shared and steady. They sat there, the rain softening outside, the box no longer a weight, but a starting point. Loyalty reshaped with honesty. Could it hold this fragile new form? The next morning, before the dust settled, the camera's red light blinks like a steady heartbeat in the dim interview room, its lens a cold eye fixed on Mara's face. She sits straighter this time, the weight of the ring box no longer a secret anchor in her pocket, but a quiet presence on the table between her and the unseen interviewer. Her fingers trace the edge of her sleeve, not fidgeting now, but grounding herself in the fabric's rough weave. Tell me about the promise again. The voice prompts from off-screen, soft but insistent, like rain tapping a window pane. Mara exhales, her breath fogging the air slightly in the cool space. Anxiety lingers at the edges of her voice. A faint tremor in her chest, the old fear of unraveling everything with words. But she meets the lens head-on, her eyes steady, green, flecked with resolve. The promise to Jonas. It's not just words we said in the heat of a moment. It's this. She touches the box lightly, the velvet cool under her fingertip. We made it thinking love was unbreakable, like a vow could seal out all the cracks. But I've learned it can't, not without facing the fears inside it. The camera zooms closer, capturing the subtle shift in her posture, the way her shoulders drop, releasing the knot of tension that's held her for weeks. Her mind flashes to the rooftop, rain slick on her skin and the dinner's heavy silence. But she doesn't dwell. Instead, she leans in, voice gaining strength. Love asks for more than promises whispered in the dark. It demands you look at the doubts, the jealousy that twists when someone like Elliot shows you a life without chains, the terror of losing yourself in loyalty. I hid those from Jonas, thinking silence protected us. But it didn't. It just built walls. A pause, the room's hush amplifying her words. The light catches a stray tear at the corner of her eye, not falling, just glistening. A marker of the internal storm ebbing toward clarity. Now, we're redefining it, including the fears, not burying them. Honesty with him, it's scary, but it's the only way the promise holds. She smiles faintly, the anxiety dissolving into a quiet determination, like dawn breaking through clouds. The interviewer doesn't respond, but the question hangs unspoken in the air between them, captured eternally by the unblinking lens. Can you truly promise, without hiding the doubts that make you human? Mara doesn't answer it outright. She just nods, ready for whatever comes next.